This all started at my sophomore year of high school. I was 15 and at a new school, so I didn't have many friends yet. I was in that phase where I thought I needed a boyfriend to have validation, so I was actively trying to find a date for the homecoming dance. A classmate suggested a junior in one of our classes, whom I will call David, to be my date, and got him to ask me out. He seemed nice, so I said yes, a decision that would haunt me for the next 2 years. David and I had fun at homecoming, so when he asked me to be his girlfriend, I said yes. It's important to note that he was quite the loner. He was very much into science and often spent time alone conducting experiments in his room, and even at school at times. I brushed it off as him being quirky, and I figured I shouldn't get in the way of his passions. But it wasn't long before I realized there was much more to his nice guy facade. Over the first several weeks of our relationship, we would talk over the phone, and David would make increasingly inappropriate comments about things he wanted to do to me. I was 15 at the time, and he was 17, so not only was I incredibly uncomfortable, but he was also nearly an adult himself, making these comments to a younger girl. I kept telling him that I wasn't comfortable with the things he was saying, but he always laughed it off as me being a prude. I was fed up after a while, and finally threatened to break up with him, and that finally made him stop. I should have recognized the red flags and bailed out at that moment, but again, I was dumb and felt like I wasn't worth anything unless I had a boyfriend. Although the inappropriate comments stopped for the time being, he would still become increasingly possessive and downright obsessed over what I was doing all hours of the day. He would intrude on conversations I had with my friends and wanted to know things that frankly weren't any of his business. One day, when I was getting into the shower, he called and my dad told him I would call him when I was done. Instead of simply waiting like a rational person would do, he called a total of 4 times over the next 10 to 15 minutes to see if I was out of the shower yet. I began to feel suffocated, but every time I asked him to back off, he would cry about how depressed he was and that he only wanted to talk to someone to feel like he was wanted. I always fell for it like the dummy I was, but now I recognized it for the clear manipulation that it was. One day, I finally had enough. I broke up with him in person at school, and he bawled like a child. I didn't let it get to me this time, however, and firmly told him that I didn't want to be his girlfriend anymore. Although he couldn't get his way, he still somehow convinced me to stay friends. I know, I was an idiot. But things didn't end there. Oh no, we're only just beginning. Over the next several months, David kept trying to get me to go out with him again, even going as far to cry in front of other people to garner sympathy. He even tried starting rumors about us having sex, which we didn't. Fortunately for me, David had earned a bad reputation throughout his school career, so no one really believed him. He would even try to trick me into a date by subtly suggesting we go see a movie as friends, which I always got around by inviting my friends to come along too. They knew what he was doing, and they never turned down the chance to help a girl out. In the last few weeks I spoke to him, he would sit on the phone for hours on end, literally begging me to take him back. And thankfully, I held strong and kept refusing. One night his brother actually called me, telling me he was crying hysterically. Eventually, it came to a point where I told him I didn't want to hang out anymore, because it was clear that he would not stop until I became his girlfriend again. He agreed to not approach me anymore, but I wouldn't be telling this story if it ended there. The very next day at school, David came up to me like nothing had happened. I once again reminded him of the conversation we had had the night before, about how we agreed not to hang out anymore, but he acted all offended that I would even suggest such a thing. Eventually, my friends and I convinced him to leave, but of course it didn't stop there. For 2 weeks straight, he would follow me around school, call my house and my cell phone. This was the days before smartphones, so blocking his number wasn't as easy. I tried to get help from the school staff, but the vice principal basically told me that there was nothing I could do because he wasn't trying to hurt me. I was frustrated, but thankfully, David seemed to back off when it was clear that I wasn't going to give in. That is, until I got another boyfriend. The following school year, my junior year, I started dating a senior named Justin. Not long after we went public with our relationship, I noticed David following me again. Now, Justin was a football player, and he was a pretty big guy with unresolved anger issues, so he didn't take kindly to this guy. He would hang out with me and my friends, and David would hover around nearby, walking by every now and then and making it blatantly obvious that he was spying on me. One day, Justin walked straight up to David and confronted him. He didn't lay his hands on him or threaten him in any way, but he did ask, "What are you doing?" in a really angry tone. David simply muttered some kind of excuse and scurried away. We thought that was the end of it, but later in the day, I was called to the principal's office. Turns out, David claims that Justin threatened him and blocked the doorway so he couldn't move. Justin denied it, of course, and told the principal that I could back up his claim, which I did. Thankfully, nothing came of it, but this was only the first of a long line of incidents. Over the school year, David and his brother, who was a year younger than me, would try to get Justin in trouble every which way they could, even starting rumors and threatening his life. A classmate of mine overheard talking about ambushing Justin and hurting him, but even though I brought this to the staff, nothing was done about it. All the while, David kept following me when Justin wasn't around. There was even an incident in the school gym one day when a bunch of classes had to stay there for the period. He and I were both there, and he made sure to sit on the bleachers nearby, even following me when I moved. I was on the verge of tears, but then I saw 2 guys I knew sitting a few rows down from me. They were cool with me, so I got their attention and, after explaining what was going on, asked them if I could sit with them to feel safer. They accepted, and we ended up having a good time talking about music and anime. In spite of this, things just kept getting worse with David. Finally, it came to a head when David's brother wrote a letter to Justin's sister. They had been good friends before this whole mess started, and in the letter, David's brother threatened physical harm to me and to Justin. The sister gave the letter to Justin, who then came to me, and we both brought it to the principal. That was when the principal called everyone involved into his office and had a nice little chat with us. The principal showed the letter to David's brother and said, "I can expel you for this right now, but I'm willing to let it go on one condition." David and Justin were both about to graduate, so the principal gave them the ultimatum. He stated that David and his brother were not to contact me or Justin in any way, shape or form for the rest of the school year, or he would see to it that neither of them would graduate. I was pissed because Justin did nothing wrong, but in the end, we just wanted this whole mess to be over with. From that point on, David didn't bother me again, thankfully, but I'm still filled with anxiety to this day. He made me afraid for my life, and even to walk the halls of my school. Justin and I ended up breaking up over the summer for unrelated reasons, and the following year, I didn't have to see either of them ever again. A few years later, however, David tried to send me a friend request on Facebook. I had an immediate panic attack, and not only deleted the request, but I blocked him as well. I even unfriended and blocked the 2 mutual friends we had, for good measure. Sure, I was being paranoid, but it made me feel better. There was one last incident involving David, not with me, but with my younger brother. When he was 14, he took his then girlfriend to see one of the Transformer movies, and David walked in. Upon recognizing my brother, he sat behind him and his date, and kept laughing uncontrollably at inappropriate times, and even started kicking their seat. My brother tried confronting him, but it did no good. They didn't bother getting the manager because my brother's date was too afraid he would attack them if they tried to leave. Thankfully, that was the last incident I or anyone close to me ever had with him. I'm doing much better now. I'm 30 years old, and, ironically, I ended up marrying one of the guys who sat with me in the gym that day. My advice to any teenagers hearing this is that you should always pay attention to red flags and get rid of toxic people in your life. It's always better to end up alone than stuck with someone who makes you feel bad and treats you like your feelings don't matter. And as for David, let's never meet again. This happened years ago, when I had gotten my first actual job, as in not just babysitting or working in a family friend's restaurant and keeping the tips. I didn't think much of it. I figured it was harmless. I would find people from around the country to chat with, learn about some other cultures, all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't give out personal information about myself, no phone number, address, nothing like that. I wasn't stupid. I made a simple profile, stated what kind of friends I was interested in making, just basic stuff. After about a month, I received a message from a man. I don't remember it word for word, but it basically said, "Hi, I found your profile and I'm super interested in being friends." He then stated that he lives in the same state as me. Though I know maybe it was rude to be snobby about someone in my state contacting me, I did politely say on my profile that I was trying to make some pen pals outside of the US. I responded politely though, and I replied to a few of his messages for a while. I found out that he lived in the same city as me. He said, "I see you love anime. I love anime. I also see you've been to Japan. I've been to Japan too. Do you go to anime conventions? Maybe we could go together the next time a convention comes to town." I felt a little uncomfortable. I put right on my page that I have no intention to meet up with anyone, just to have an online pen pal. I politely told him that, and he didn't like it. "I just thought we could be friends, since we have similar interests," he said. Again, I politely told him I'm not interested in meeting anyone in person from the website. He pretended to be fine with it and went right back to rambling about his interests. I logged out of the website for a few days and focused on my personal life, going to work, doing school, and taking care of my disabled father. One day, I woke up to notifications on a number of my instant messaging apps, all stating basically the same thing. "Hey, it's, insert name here, from the Pen Pals website, smiley face." He messaged me on like 4 of my chat apps, which I did not give him. How did he find them? I was really annoyed. As politely as I could, I messaged him on the Pen Pal website. Hey, so I don't know how you found my IDs for my chat apps, but that was kind of over the line. That wasn't really appropriate. Not one app, but you messaged me on like 4. He says, I'm sorry, but I really wanted to talk to you, and you haven't been on the website for a few days. So I replied, that doesn't make it okay. I also have a personal life, and a job, and a family. I can't spend all my time on here. So he says, that's why I messaged you on those apps. I don't have them listed on my profile. How did you even find them? He avoided the subject. He said, I'm sorry I did that. I'm just trying to be your friend. I just want to be friends with you. Well, this isn't the way to do it. I'm very uncomfortable that you somehow found that information that I didn't give to you. I don't think we should talk anymore. I don't want to be friends with you. I'm sorry. Please do not contact me again. I immediately blocked him on all of those apps and on the Pen Pal website. For a few months, everything was fine. Then suddenly, I get a message on one of the apps, and the user wasn't in my friends list. The message was basically as follows. You stupid fat ugly bitch. No one will ever love you. You'll never find a man to love you. You're so fat and ugly. Why don't you just kill yourself, bitch? Do the world a favor. I rolled my eyes and blocked the account. Throughout the course of a year, every few months, across my social media platforms, I was being harassed. I had completely forgotten about the man until I received a message on the Pen Pal website. The account didn't have a name or photo. It was just a random username. The message I received was the same nonsense as before, calling me fat and ugly, saying I'm a bitch, telling me that I should die. Once I got the message on that website, I knew it had to be him. I had no other issues with anyone. I replied saying that guy's name, telling him that I knew it was him, and that his behavior is really sad and pathetic. He replied with, I just wanted to be your friend, you bitch. Watch your back. Then the account blocked me. For a few more months, nothing really happened. I got 1 or 2 messages from fake accounts again, but I had grown used to it and just immediately blocked them. Then, one day, I received a Facebook message from a police officer. He was contacting me about a profile I apparently made on a website called Ashley Madison. It's used for people to have affairs and hookups, etc. I had never heard of it before then, and absolutely did not have an account there. I had a long talk with him, where he told me his department investigates human trafficking, and thought I was an underage girl, possibly in danger. It had my personal Facebook account listed on the profile, as well as other ways to contact me. I was in shock. He advised me to contact the website and ask them to take down the profile. But he said to me, you seem like a sweet girl. I don't know who you pissed off, but don't read the profile. My curiosity got the better of me, but I should have taken his advice. Using some of my normal selfies, an account was made, and the profile stated a lot of horrible things, very derogatory. It made me sick to my stomach to read some of the things that it said I apparently wanted to have done to me. Thankfully, the website took quick action to take down the profile. The next time I got one of those hate messages online, I snapped. I didn't hold back, cursing him out for being so immature and disgusting because someone simply didn't want to be his friend. The account blocked me without answering. I didn't get a message from any accounts for a while. One day, when I was closing at work, I was waiting outside for a family member to pick me up. I didn't have my own vehicle, and my family would give me rides to and from work. As I was listening to music, waving goodbye to my manager as they drove off, I got a notification on one of my apps. You ugly bitch. I sighed and rolled my eyes as I opened the message. As I was typing, another message came in that made me stop typing and freeze up. You're all alone now. I could kill you right now if I wanted to. No one would ever find you. I backed up against the building. I didn't have keys, only the manager did, who just left. I looked around through the parking lot, not a car in sight. The streetlights shined dimly around me. My heart started to race as more messages came in. You're so ugly, you know that. No one would ever fall in love with you. Your family probably won't even miss you, you disgusting bitch. I should just kill you right now. I started to cry, the phone shaking in my hands. Just as another text came in, a car pulled up in front of me. It was my family member coming to pick me up. I took a deep breath and quickly got into the car. Sorry I'm late, I got stuck at 2 red lights. Your manager already left? They just left you alone out here? Just drive, I accidentally screamed at them, tears streaming down my face. What's wrong? Did something happen at work? I was crying, shaking. They took my phone and looked at it, seeing the messages. What the hell? Who the hell is texting you? I said, I don't know who it is. Please, just drive, I want to get out of here. We went back to their place, and they wanted to call the police, but I told them not to. I had no idea who they were, or where to find them to make a police report against them. Instead, they called another family member who works in the IT field. After they heard the whole story, everything I've endured for almost 2 years, they told me I should have made new accounts from the beginning of this harassment. I listened to them, and right there and then, I made new accounts on all my social media. I worked at that job for another month, but my family member had told my manager what happened, so I was never put on closing shifts again. I was only given morning shifts where I clocked out of work when the sun was still out, but I still didn't feel safe. They knew where I worked. My manager understood when I quit. All the harassment stopped. To this day, I still haven't received any more of those messages. Now I'm married, I still live in this city, and I don't live in that neighborhood anymore. I feel comfortable, and I don't feel afraid that this person is going to find me and stalk me again. But even now, anytime I get a random message from someone who isn't on my friends list, my heart races for a second. So this happened about 6 years ago when I was 12. I was a huge PlayStation and Minecraft fan, and that's how I met this kid. This all started when I was on a public party that PS3 offered, and my 12-year-old self just wanted a friend to play Minecraft with, so I sent out a request for anyone who would play with a 12-year-old female. Some guy named Jeff replied. We began to play daily, inviting his best friend Sonny quite often. Sonny was actually a great dude, and we keep loose contact to this day. Jeff started to get too comfortable and clingy with me. If I couldn't or wouldn't play one day, he would spam call and text on Skype until I answered with an excuse. If my excuse wasn't good enough, such as I just didn't feel like it, he would force me to stay on the call, saying that he would cut himself or kill himself if I didn't listen to his daily sob story. Oftentimes, due to him living multiple states away, he wouldn't let me sleep if he felt I wasn't caring enough that day. At the time, I thought it was normal. I mean, of course, if you care about someone, you have to sacrifice a little sleep, right? Well, he kept pushing, and I kept caving. He asked me to be his girlfriend, and of course I originally said no. Then he was threatening to cut and kill himself again, saying that he loved me and I wouldn't even give him a chance. I was heartless and never cared about him for real. I wasn't comfortable dating him and didn't trust him much. Then Sonny called me and told me how bad it was. How he was crying and was making plans to kill himself because I rejected him. Sonny begged me to give him a chance, and I couldn't say no. So we started dating. Yes, I know the irony. I was the Minecraft girlfriend. But as a boyfriend, he was even worse than ever before. He would ask about guy friends I would hang out with at school. He knew I struggled with my gender and hung out with mostly guys because I felt more like a guy, and this made him extremely angry and jealous. He told me to stop hanging out with all my guy friends at once, and to make him happy so he wouldn't hurt himself. I said I did, but he had no way to fact check me, so of course I kept my friends. Early on, he would make me Skype late at night or extremely early in the morning, always waking me up and introducing me to his family. He would show me off like I was a trophy, saying I was the only good thing he had. And although his family was nice, they were very overbearing, asking lots of overly personal questions and not leaving us alone for long periods of time. After a few months, I couldn't take it, despite my fear that he might hurt himself if I broke up with him. For months he would beg for me back, saying he would cut himself or kill himself. He did send me pictures of his arms with cuts in it, and I tried my best to calm him down. But I was stern on staying only friends. Finally, he calmed down and stopped the possessive behavior. Or so I thought. I started hanging out with a new group of 3 Australian guys, and Jeff did not like this. He looked on my friends list, adding every single person, and messaging all of them, asking if they were my boyfriend, including my dad. My group obviously told me about this, and I went off on Jeff, telling him that he does not, nor has he ever, owned me. He needs to leave me, my friends, and my life alone and stop playing the victim. Finally, that seemed to work. I still got messages from him when he would stalk my profiles, so I would block him from social media. Sometimes I think he would use Sonny to keep tabs on me, but it didn't affect me, so I left it alone. It took 3 years for my life to go back to normal. I'm a 26-year-old woman who has lived in Alaska my whole life. This will become important later when you see just how far this person would go to try and be with me. This all happened a few years back when I was in college. Like any woman at that age, I made a grave mistake of attempting online dating to disastrous consequences. I was using OkCupid to try and find a potential partner, but I also had it listed in my bio that I was looking for friends. One day, this girl, we'll call her Jen, messaged me. She seemed nice, and we got to talking and really hit it off, but I made it clear that at the time, I wasn't looking for a relationship due to being preoccupied with work and school. I should preface the rest of this story by saying that I like to help people, and it's really hard for me not to. Honestly, it's the biggest flaw I've had over the years, and was a contributing factor in multiple abusive relationships I've been in before and since this incident. Anyway, the result of this has been that I tend to drain myself to try and help others, and it attracts unsavory and unstable people. We started going into conversations about our various interests, and eventually we stumble across gaming as a mutual interest. Jen suggested we play this new game, Ark Survival Evolved. It's a cursed rune of a game that wasn't very well optimized for any system. To be honest, It was an absolute dumpster fire of a game, but at the time I thought had a lot of potential, so I spent countless hours making various bases and trading dinosaurs and getting into the whole bit of brave explorer of a new world kind of thing. Jen and I spent a lot of time in the multiplayer, building things and trading dinos and talking and having a good time. During this time, she opened up to me about a lot of abuse that she had suffered from past relationships and from a family that didn't accept her being gay. Having also been through some difficult times, I felt a lot of empathy for her and would try and build her up and talk her out of her self-hating talk when I had the energy to. This is when the trouble started though. I had noticed that she was being a bit too friendly with me and kept being overly sexual and flirty for a week or two. It started with in-game RP kind of stuff, where you do the asterisk kisses and the hugs thing, and it was all just too much. She was really nice and all, but totally not my type. I had addressed the situation multiple times, saying that it had made me feel very uncomfortable, but every time we had that conversation, Jen would tell me that she understood and would back off, etc., etc. You know the drill. It never got through to her. By this time, we had started having communications on a chat app called Telegram. I wasn't always on my computer, so seems like a convenient solution. I started noticing that a lot of the emojis she was using displayed a very similar lack of respect for my boundaries. Just as before, I had mentioned to Jen that it made me uncomfortable. I knew she had a lot going on upstairs, but me being me, I have always been a very gentle soul. It's always been very difficult for me to set firm boundaries and to keep those, especially when somebody is suffering. One weekend was very packed with homework and a double shift at work, so I ended up getting home very late. I booted up the computer just to check some emails as I ate my dinner of top ramen before zonking out. When Steam loaded, I noticed that I had hundreds of missed messages and comments, all from Jen. I started from the top, and as I read through, things became progressively more and more out of control. By the time I was halfway through, every other message was either calling me names or threatening to kill herself if I didn't reply. I had seen enough, so I just sent a message saying that her behavior was unacceptable, and I can't be friends with someone who's going to be abusive like this. I blocked her on Steam and on Telegram. This is when it really hit the fan. About 30 minutes later, my phone starts going off. Mind you, this is about 12:30 AM Alaska time, so that would make it about 3 AM for her. She called my cell number with what she had saved from Telegram. She was absolutely out of control. From the moment I picked up the phone, she was screaming obscenities and slurs at me, interspersed with confessions of love and desperate pleas for me to unblock her so we could just be friends again, and that she would make it up to me and all that crap. I tried to explain to her that what she had done was out of line, and that I just didn't have the emotional capacity to go through another abusive friendship, but she was having absolutely none of it. I did the only thing that I could do. I ended the call and blocked the number. 5 minutes later, I get a call from an unrecognized private number and picked up, knowing exactly what I was in for. It was her again, calling from her parents' landline. I immediately hung up. 15 seconds goes by and my phone rings again. I dismissed the call. My phone rang again about 5 minutes later from the same number. This goes on for a solid 15 minutes before I just turned my phone off and went to bed. It was a fairly sleepless night, but thankfully the next day I had class in the evening, so I had the opportunity to sleep in. I woke up from an okay sleep and turned my phone on to find over 100 missed calls and about as many voicemails. I checked my Telegram to talk to a different friend about the chaos that was going on, to find new messages from 6 new accounts. Most of them were just walls of text filled with the same out-of-control ramblings that she had said on the phone. They were the texts of someone who had completely lost it, all over the place in tone and message, switching back and forth between "I love you" and "insert slurs here," with little regard for spacing, punctuation, capitalization, and general legibility. I was horrified. I mean, I had seen my fair share of breakdowns, but never ones that impacted me directly. Then I get a phone call. Again, unknown private number. Hoping she had calmed down enough to listen to reason, I picked up, and she started in, sobbing and screaming unintelligibly at me, starting right back in. Mad as hell, I screamed into the phone for her to shut up, and for the first time in what was probably about 14 hours, she did. Very clearly, I told her not to call me again, and that she had gone way over the line, and that I wanted nothing to do with her after this. In a calm monotone that still makes me shudder to this day, she said, "What do I do to prove my love to you? Do you want me to kill myself? How about my dog? I can kill her for you." Honestly, I was so shocked, I just told her no, and that if she loved me, she would move on and get help. This was the worst possible answer. Immediately, she started in again screaming, so I hung up and turned my phone off. If I tried turning it on again, she called me back constantly for the rest of the morning until I turned it off. The next day, I went in and got my number changed, hoping that would be the end of it. A few days passed, and I'm at work. My boss comes over saying I had a phone call from my mum. I thought nothing of it until I picked up the phone and heard Jen's voice on the other end. She started in talking about how she had been cutting herself and how she would keep going until she was dead if I didn't unblock her. So I hung up the phone without a word. I told my boss not to bother me with phone calls unless it was from a known listed number on my emergency contacts file. With my new phone, I set up Telegram again and started going through blocking all of her alternate accounts. But that still wasn't the end of it. For about 6 months after this whole thing went down, every few weeks, I would get a new Telegram contact on a new number begging me to unblock her so we could be together. I know it's not some big climactic end, but honestly, what could I do? All I knew of her at the time was her first name, screen name, and state. If I had reported it to the police, nothing would have been done anyway. The cops here don't take kindly to queer people like myself, so I just didn't want to risk any BS with them. Oh, and to Jen, the out-of-control person from Ark Survival Evolved, I hope you've gotten help. But please, let's never meet again. In high school, I had a stalker. I was 16 and we met on Facebook. He went to a school nearby and we decided to meet up for a movie. We had a great time together and ended up dating. The first time he came to my parents' house, he had an ankle monitor on for house arrest and wouldn't tell anyone why. Red flag number 1. And since he was a minor, we couldn't find out. My parents obviously didn't allow us to hang out, so we hung out at his house or around town at the YMCA camp. I was rebellious and naive. Things started to get weird when I noticed his family was pretty odd. One day, we were having sex in his bedroom, and I saw his father looking through the blinds. I screamed and called him out, and his dad ran off. Stalker guy told me that his dad was just into redheads and liked to watch us. So this wasn't the first time. I went to leave and his mum was doing crack in the kitchen. So I decided it was time to break up. This is when it got bad. He started crying and told me that he's in cancer treatment and that's why he, quote, needs me. He doesn't have long to live, blah blah blah. I believed him and told him we could be friends. This is when the stalking started. He switched schools to my high school, but never went to class. He would just stand outside my classroom, looking inside until it was passing period. When I would leave class, he wouldn't address me. He would just follow about 10 to 15 feet behind me to my next period and stand outside the classroom again. I was too intimidated to say something to him. He was 6'4" and a heavy-set guy, so I just let it happen for weeks. It started to progress to where he would follow me home every day. He would get on the same bus as me, despite living across town, and walk, again 10 to 15 feet behind me, all the way to my house. He would stand outside, just staring up at my window, until around the time my parents got home. And then, he would just leave. Finally, I told him to get lost and leave me alone. I told him we could no longer be friends or acquaintances and to forget about me. However, that escalated things way further. I started getting 150 calls a night. Half of them were him screaming death threats and in detail torture methods that he wanted to do to me. The other half were him singing me love songs that he wrote on his guitar. Every time I blocked his number, he seemed to magically get a new one and leave more messages. I woke up one day to see that overnight, he had left me one of those dancing, singing snowmen on my porch. He had stabbed it in the head, and the knife was still sticking out. He covered it in his liquid deodorant that I previously mentioned liking the smell of, and I noticed there was a hole where the little song recording device was. When I pressed the hand, it was not the regular Frosty the Snowman song that it played. It was his voice singing eerily, "I'm going to have you forever. I'm never going to let you be." I was done at this point and told my parents, who contacted the school. They suspended him, but he still waited at my bus stop every day and walked to my home with me. One day, he ran at me like he was going to tackle me. When I tensed up for the impact, he stopped and hugged me. It wasn't a regular hug. It was like he was trying to crush me. I was 5'1" and about 90 pounds at the time, and he ended up cracking one of my ribs. I cried, and he started crying too before running off. He left me a voicemail, apologizing in song. This one night is a night I'll never forget, and it's the reason we got a restraining order, and my dad got a gun. I woke up one evening for no reason, just was fully awake. I got up to go to the kitchen to get a glass of water to relax, and in the reflection on my fridge, I saw movement in my backyard. I couldn't see well because it was so dark outside and so light inside, so I went to the back sliding glass door to get a better look. When I got closer, I was met with the silhouette of a 6'4" man standing just outside the door. Stalker guy was in my backyard, under my room at 3 a.m. He was just staring at me. I yelled and my parents got up, but he was gone by the time my dad went outside. There's a patio right outside my bedroom window that goes all the way to the ground. so it's possible he could have been on the top of the patio looking directly into my bedroom window before. We got a restraining order granted shortly after that, and Stalker Guy dropped out of school. I haven't seen him since in person, but every 6 months or so, he makes a new Facebook account and tries to friend request me. I just block it and report it every time. Scary stuff. You'll ever hear of that myth that if you wake up in the middle of the night for no reason, there's likely something looking at you? Well, maybe it's true. I don't know what he's doing now or where he went, but I don't care to know. Let's not meet, ever, again. This happened 4 years ago. I was 20 at the time. The first time I met the guy who would become my grocery store stalker. He was standing outside the store, collecting money for the Salvation Army Christmas time donations. I'm a fairly friendly person, so I like to say hi to people who work at places I frequent to be nice. This guy was a kid around my age, very tall, with a mild resemblance to Lurch from the Addams Family. Dark circles under the eyes, short black hair, kind of vacant look in his eyes. I chatted with him for maybe 2 minutes, just idle chit-chat about the weather and whatnot. Nothing particularly memorable or interesting, and then waved goodbye and went home. Little did I know that this single moment would be the start of something that would have me genuinely afraid. About 4 or 5 months passed, and I hadn't seen him again. Then, one day, as I was grocery shopping with a friend, we were chatting, and she suddenly got really quiet and kind of recoiled backwards, looking behind me. I turned around to see this guy, who had to be about 6'4", towering over me, not 8 inches from my body. He said hi, and told me he remembered me from that December I had talked to him, and then asked for my number. I, being young, never having experienced this type of interaction before, told him I didn't have my number memorized, but that I would write his down and text him later. I kind of half waved my phone at him, pointing out my at-the-time boyfriend, whose picture was my wallpaper, making a point to say, "Oh look, that's my boyfriend," hoping he would clue in, but no luck. He told me his number, which, immediately upon getting, I blocked, without letting him get my phone number. However, what really made my blood run cold was what he said after I put my phone away. He leaned in real close, and in a low voice he told me, "Whatever I text you is for your eyes only." At this point, I started to feel genuinely uncomfortable. I said, "Yeah, sure, nice talking to you, but we gotta get back to shopping." And I grabbed my friend and dragged her off, shooting a panicked look at her and asking her why she didn't bail me out. Apparently, he scared her too with his getting so close to me, and she didn't know what to do. I want to make it clear that I'm not exactly a small girl. I'm 5'8" and solidly built. I can certainly handle myself, and I very rarely feel intimidated or small in the presence of anyone, male or female. But this guy made me feel tiny and scared. In the months that would follow, he would make me feel truly frightened. I had hoped that creepy interaction would be the last time I saw him, but that was unfortunately not the case. After that initial meeting with him, saying that creepy thing about his texts being for my eyes only, it seemed like I would run into him every single time I got to the store. No matter what checkout lane I was in, he always seemed to appear at the end of it when I was finished shopping, and every time I was in the store, I would notice him out of the corner of my eye, watching me, no matter what area I was in. One time, I even caught him following me out to my car. At this point, I got scared and decided to say something to the managers. After letting the managers know what was going on, they assured me that they would tell him not to talk to me. After that, he wouldn't speak to me, but I would continue to see him following me around the store at a distance every time I went up there. It got so bad, and I felt so frightened that I started to be afraid to go to the store at all. But I'm one of those stubborn people who refuses to be intimidated by someone to the point where I would stop doing something. I had hoped that maybe it was a coincidence that he was following me. After all, it was a big store, and maybe he just had things to do that just happened to be in the areas I was shopping in. So I started to pay close attention to my surroundings. Once I really started paying attention, I realized that every single time I was up there, I would constantly notice him in the areas of the store I was in. During my last encounter with him, I went up to the store to grab just 2 or 3 items I needed for dinner that night. And I first saw him standing outside the store when I got there. And with his back to me, I quickly ran inside, hoping he didn't see me. Unfortunately, a few minutes later, I saw him at the very back of the store, and items in hand, I immediately made a beeline towards the front. As soon as I got near the checkout, I ducked behind one of the shelf displays and watched carefully at the front of the store to see if he would appear, and he did. I watched as he looked up and down the checkout, and when he didn't see me there, I saw him step outside. At this point, I quickly ran into the nearest open cashier and rang up my items, and stuck my head out of the door to look for him. I didn't see him there immediately, so I started trying to make my way back to where I was parked. I had parked quite far away, near the side of the store where a bunch of the other small stores and restaurants were lined up, and as I was walking towards my car, I realized I saw him standing by the entrance that I had first entered the store through, and I ducked behind a pillar immediately, hoping he didn't see me. I watched carefully from behind the pillar, and as he scanned the parking lot, he obviously couldn't find me. After a minute or two, he started to walk out towards the direction of the parking lot in front of the store, and so I took that opportunity to make my run for it to my car as soon as he was far enough away that I felt safe. As soon as I got into my car, I locked the doors, and to my horror, when I looked up, he was standing there about 15 feet from my car with a shopping cart in front of him. I knew he followed me, and he knew I knew. I fully believed that he had chased after me, and when I made it to my car, he grabbed the nearest cart to make it look like he was collecting them from the parking lot. I remember just feeling absolutely terrified at that moment. I went home and immediately told my grandfather what had happened. I began crying and shaking, and my grandfather told me to get in the car. We were going to settle this. He and I drove up to the store in his car, and he walked me into the store and demanded we speak with the managers immediately. Both of them. When the managers arrived at customer service, he asked me to tell them what had been happening, and demanded that they ensure he left me alone, or that he would involve the police. The managers swore up and down that they would take care of it. As far as I know, he wasn't fired immediately, because my friend who first encountered him with me when this whole thing began told me that she would see him from time to time when she was there by herself, but that any time I went with her, she would never see him. I fully believe he knew whenever I was there, only this time, instead of stalking me, he avoided me. Eventually, everyone who knew the situation stopped seeing him there, so I think he may have gotten fired or moved on from that store. Either way, I haven't had any issues since, but I have never in my life felt so afraid of another human being as I did that day seeing him make eye contact with me in the parking lot as I locked my car doors. It still creeps me out to think that he was watching me so closely every time I entered the store that he could so easily avoid or follow me whenever he wanted. So, to the guy who stalked me, every time I went grocery shopping for 4 months straight, let's never meet again. So I'm a guy from the UK. I live in a town in Wales, albeit not the little villages that most people imagine. My town is a popular holiday destination along the coast of Wales. This isn't overly relevant to the story, but I just thought I would give everyone some context. So it started when I was around 15 years old, so about 8 years ago. I was dating a girl from 2 towns over. I would usually get the train to hers and back. However, this one night, her family weren't supposed to be home, and we were kind of being watched by her brother, who was about 19 or 20 and was pretty chill. The plan was to stay the night. We were up late playing on the Wii, but her parents unexpectedly came home. I never got along with her mother, and the whole thing got kind of heated, and I was kicked out of the house and told I couldn't stay over. It was about 2 a.m, and I didn't want to call my own parents in worry of waking them up. My mother is a very strict woman, so I began the long trudge home. It was roughly about an hour and a quarter's worth of walking, so I expected to be home by around 4:30. So I walked along the weird concrete bit above the beach. Not sure what it's called, and I stopped after half an hour of walking as there's a public toilet which is kind of run down, but also open 24 hours, and I was desperate. I was expecting it to be empty or just have a homeless dude sleeping in it, but I was wrong. There was a guy using the urinal. This guy looked to be in his mid to late 50s maybe. A little on the overweight side, but not extremely. He had grey, messy-ish hair, but other than that, looked pretty normal. He definitely didn't look homeless. I remember he made a quick joke about something, but I don't remember what. I politely laughed, did my business, and left. After about another 15 minutes of walking, the weather had gotten pretty bad. It started to rain heavy, and the wind was picking up. I seem to remember this was around November time, so it was pretty cold. Anyway, so I'm walking, and a car drives by, beeps, and pulls over just in front of me. I had assumed it was someone I know, but couldn't think who. I got to the car, and the dude from the toilet was inside. He asked me where I was headed, and I told him. He said that was a long walk, and I couldn't be expected to walk all that way in this weather, and he offered to give me a lift. In hindsight, I probably should have refused, but the weather was bad, and at the time, he wasn't giving off any weird vibes. The drive took about 15 minutes, I think, maybe 20. The more I was in the car with him, the more I started to get vibes that there was something off about this guy. He was telling me his best friend was a 14-year-old lad who stays over at his place a lot and they drink together, and if I ever wanted to join, I was welcome to. He was asking me some really invasive questions as well. I don't fully remember what they were. I just remember that they weren't the kind of questions to ask someone that you're giving a simple lift home to. Anyway, we got to the street around the corner from my place, and I asked him to just drop me off there. I told him my house wasn't accessible by road, and that I would walk the rest of the way. He gave me his number, and told me to ring him when I got back to the house safely, as he wanted to make sure I got home okay. I asked him what his name was, as at this point he knew my full name, and he just said Pete. I said, Pete what? My phone wants a surname. He wouldn't tell me, just kept saying, just called me Pete. I later found out that Pete was a fake name too. I got into my house and texted him, just to let him know that I was home safe. Probably a bad decision, but back then, I was full of bad decisions, to be honest. The next day came, and I was expecting everything to go back to normal, but it didn't, because I stupidly gave Pete my number when I texted him. I started to get texts from him every morning basically saying good morning to me and wishing me well. I replied to the first few and then started ignoring them. He then started trying to ring me every single evening. I would ignore most of his calls, but he would often repeatedly ring until I answer. He was sending me these texts inviting me over to his house for some drinks. He kept telling me that he had just gotten himself a pool table and wanted me to come and play it with him. He was telling me a story of a friend he was playing pool with, the 14-year-old I was talking about, and accidentally let slip that the guy called him John. I collared him about this and said, "I thought your name was Pete." He said, "Oh, no, my friend's name is John." I said, "You just said your friend called you John, and you told me that your friend was called Tom." He said, "Ah, well, some people call me John. It's a nickname. But his name is John too." He hesitated saying this, and I kind of clicked that he was telling a bunch of lies. I kept refusing, but he kept asking. After a while, my mum wanted to know who this dude who kept texting and ringing me was. I told her, and she rang him herself from her phone and told him that if he carried on texting and ringing me, she would be calling the police. I didn't get any more texts from him after that. But it didn't end there. I had a routine, you see, and he knew it. I always walked my dog at 4:30 every afternoon and played with her for 40 minutes on the field at the end of my street, just near where he had dropped me off. I started to notice his car pulling up there within 5 minutes of me getting there with my dog. He had tinted windows, but I would always notice the car lights were always left on and the engine was always running. Also, I recognized his car. I would occasionally notice the car door open and a large flash from that direction, as if someone was taking pictures. I started changing the time I walked my dog, but he would eventually figure it out and start showing up either earlier or later to coincide with when I was walking her. This went on for months, and I never mentioned it to anyone, but one day, it just stopped. He stopped pulling up at the side of the field. I never saw his car anymore. Not a text message or phone call from him. It all just stopped. I ended up getting a new phone after about a year, and had that for another 2 years. I dug out my old phone when I was around 18 or 19, after the aforementioned dog passed away. I had some old pictures and videos of her on that phone, and wanted to transfer them over to my PC so that I always had them. I turned on the phone, which had been turned off for several years now, and still had the old SIM in it. This was when I got my final message from Pete. It was an odd one, and was about 14 months old. It said something along the lines of, "Hi, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I just thought you should know that over New Year I was diagnosed with an illness, and I've been told I don't have long left to live. You were a good friend in the short time we knew each other. I live at such and such address, and I would really appreciate it if you could come around, just so I can have a last chat with you. I've got some beers in, and if it gets too late, you can stay the night. Just drop me a phone call when you want to come around, so I can get everything ready for you. See you soon." I have no idea if Pete or John was genuinely ill, or just trying to lure me to his house. I've never been to the address he sent me, and never responded to him or heard from him since. I didn't reply to him, and that was the last I heard from the guy. So yeah, that's the story. Not tremendously exciting, but kind of had a big impact on me during those years.